Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Iris Morales, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the MNN El Barrio Firehouse Community Media Center. Tonight, we present the works of Puerto Rican women writers in New York. Their writings reflect contemporary voices coming from a rich tradition that goes back to Puerto Rico. Here at the Firehouse, we honor this legacy and have named places throughout the facility for Puerto Rican women writers. The gallery space in the lobby is named for Luisa Capetillo. She was a feminist, a labor organizer, and the first woman in Puerto Rico to write and publish her feminist ideas in the early 19th century. On the second floor, an Express television studio is named after Julia de Burgos, renowned poet, educator, and activist for women's rights and Puerto Rican independence. She died tragically in this neighborhood in 1953. We want everyone who visits the Firehouse to learn about Luisa Capetillo and Julia de Burgos, their work and their contributions. Similarly, it is an honor for me to introduce tonight's program, Breaking Ground, Abriendo Caminos. Dr. Mirna Nieves has edited an anthology featuring the poetry, poetic prose, and fiction of 46 Puerto Rican women writers. Tonight, we have the opportunity to hear from 5 of them: Magdalena Gomez, Mirna Nieves, Maria Mar, Rina Valentin, and Dalma Llanos Figueroa. I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mirna Nieves, my collaborator and the producer of tonight's event, to provide you with a background about the presentation and the writers. Dr. Nieves is an accomplished writer and editor who has published several books. She is a recipient of the Pen Club Award of Puerto Rico and is a professor at Boricua College. Please welcome Dr. Mirna Nieves.
Good evening, buenas noches. It is a very happy occasion for me to be celebrating with all of you the publication of Breaking Ground, Abriendo Caminos, anthology of Puerto Rican women writers in New York from 1980 to 2012. I would first like to thank Iris Morales, director of the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, for offering the resources of this organization and making this event possible. I would also like to thank writer Jose Angel Figueroa, friend and colleague, for suggesting this reading and for introducing me to Iris. Thanks to Maria Mar, who kindly assisted me in making ready tonight's program. I also wish to thank my publisher, Mario Picayo from Editorial Campana, and special thanks also go to Boricua College for co-producing this book. I welcome everyone in the audience. Thank you for attending this event. It is a pleasure to present 5 writers from the anthology. Breaking Ground, Abriendo Caminos, took many years to compile. It was a long project. This project evolved from my work as director of the Boricua College Winter Poetry Series, a yearly cycle of readings that were held for 20 years. These readings gave me the opportunity to meet many writers and artists from the Puerto Rican community as well as from other communities. I noticed that the quality and force of the literary work produced by Puerto Rican women writers were both powerful and meaningful. However, The majority of these writers were rarely included in anthologies, magazines, or literary reviews. I decided in that time to take action to change that situation by sharing their work in a publication that would honor this generation of writers. I also wanted to expand the literary scope of the city. The main purpose of this anthology is to present the wide spectrum of poetry, poetic prose, and fiction produced by Puerto Rican women writers in New York. Another purpose is to document the activism of these writers in the last 3 decades. The anthology includes 46 writers, of which 44 are alive. It includes writers of various ages. Some write in English, others in Spanish, and a few of them write in both languages. Our primary concern is to make known the existing literary work. I would now like to call attention to the cover art of the book, when you buy the book, produced by visual artist Ibelis Jimenez. The image that you see in the cover is very symbolic because it's entitled Ia, also known as Itiba Kahubaba, the primordial mother or feminine archetype in the Arawak myths of the Caribbean. The painting captures the complexity, sometimes chaos, that women writers face in the city and within themselves, as well as the vortex that hopefully suggests a place of light and joy. This book is dedicated to the women in my family, particularly my mother Anna, who lent me her strength and conviction. It is also dedicated to the future generations, my daughter Sadia, my granddaughter Sofia, because they will carry the inspiration of this anthology. Finally, there are my precious writers. I deeply appreciate your generosity and your talent. Congratulations on the publication of your work. And now it's time to delight our audience with great writing. Therefore, we will have our first poet.
Soy Magdalena Gomez, and the title of my poem is Plums and Scissors. Sleepwalk into closet, squat, piss into mommy's size 4.5 shoes, bound feet of malnourished sex traffic on the Dominican, Haitian, US knuckles of Trujillo's fist. Journey from open sewage childhood of pro-industrial Borican shantytown, El Fanguito. Feet shrunk on their own, afraid to touch contaminated ground. Feet first, I kicked my way out of horror, causing more horror. Mommy's tiny womb shrunk by force of will, keeping out monsters and foreign objects. I was too big for mommy's little life of semen-drenched corners and torn hair. Rage came with motherhood, wild jet, leaking diesel, fiery, landing on my body, my face, broken veins. From years of slapping, covered by makeup, twisted mouth, from years of sneaking out terrible prayers. Please, Jesus, please, Jesus, help me kill her. Perseverated litanies, cutting plums with scissors. Please, Jesus, help me kill her. Urine screaming everywhere into perfect rows of unworn shoes. In her seamstress hand, a needle. In her eyes, the downward threat to my toto. With machete pulled from my guilty vagina, I killed her, I killed her, I killed her, I killed her. Lolita's bullets in my mouth, cane field in my stomach, Luisa Capetillo in my will to live. Hens cackle wildly, trapped in towers, far from touching ground, pecking post-colonial dissertations on cracked walls, scabs forming over infested tenure tracks. Post-colonial discourse over egg salad. The only post is the one with which I must defend myself again and again and again and again, trafficked by the language of denial. Gandules jump off white rice in a mass suicide of shame. My body for sale on the open colonial market, the instant best friend of ignorance on Diversity Day. My feet naked, large, swift, kick hard, break the teeth of history's dirty mouth. Yammering liberals escort me to aluminum trays of dried pork scraps, cozying up to Boston cream pie. My stomach churns with all the vowels in Huracan. I am pissing into the right shoes at last. Despierta, despierta. 1,000 abortions by omission in this post-colonial body, in this nuevo San Juan. My body, the sheath of memory's blade. In the mirror, my mother's face. I no longer cringe. Now, we are both free.
Fish Soup, Notes for Aurora's Autobiography. I didn't learn to cry because my mother cried all the time, so I had to be the strong, cheerful one. When she couldn't get up to go to work, I was the one who had to open the windows and let the sunlight in, because she would seal herself up in her room, cowering under the covers, bed sheet wrapped around herself from head to toe. She would start moaning at 5 o'clock in the morning that she didn't want to leave. So I would open the windows, pick up around her bed, and after attempting to take the covers off, which she resisted like a wounded animal, I would sit by her side on the bed, and as if nothing odd were happening, I would begin to tell her my future plans, that I would study until I became a doctor. I would be an educator like her. I would write many books, and I would travel a lot. And I would talk and talk and talk so that she could live the hope through me. After an hour or two, she would begin to roll down the sheet, which she still held tightly against her head, to show a puffy, tear-stained pillow lines etched on her cheeks. I would try to show her something, sometimes a book, sometimes the pretty dress I would wear at my graduation. She would look at these things and then would serenely come out of them. I would try not to kiss her then, so she could emerge on her own, alone, or at least without me. Sometimes my little sister would come in and kiss her. Sometimes she would cry with her. When my mother was composed, my little sister would jump up onto the bed, climb all over my mother, and nestle against her. After a while, my mother would sleep for several hours. Then she would get up and get dressed in silence. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she was well, talking, moving about, normal life where we would forget the well at dawn. During those days, my father, when he didn't go to work or on weekends, would go to the kitchen and cook. Sometimes after rising at 5 in the morning to leave the house at 5:30, halfway to his job just as he reached the Oaxaca tunnel, he would turn his car around and come back home. He returned because he thought my mother was very ill that day. Later on, I realized that my parents had spent their honeymoon at the Oaxaca hotel, and that was always his turning point. My father would make us fish soup every day, sometimes for 2 weeks straight. Sometimes he would add rice to the white broth. It was delicious. We would eat it gratefully and say 1,001 things about the soup. But after 2 weeks, we would gently complain because it seemed as if we were drowning in broth. Those were the days of tears and broth and tears. A friend asked me, what do I do now when I go through difficult situations and I don't cry? I tell her that my chest tightens up, but I don't cry. My tears won't come out. I don't know why, but I don't cry. She asks me if I still eat fish soup, and I realize that whenever I am in a restaurant and they have it in the menu, I'd order it. I always think of the soup and the fish with the sockets in the water because it seems it's nutritious, especially for the brain. Even though I was frightened during those times, and I didn't show it, I remember my father's soup, and this soup and the sustenance in it invaded all my corners, all my body, comforting me. Thank you.
Letter to my brother, translated by Ben Soto. When you finally let me into your games, I was the Indian and you the cowboy. Yours were the newfangled pistols, the sheriff's badge, which authorized your kicks and punches. Yours too were the bow and arrows you lent me because you didn't like playing the Indian. Mine were the braids and the 2 or 3 feathers I stole from the chicken coop. The Wild West bordered the creek. The unexplored frontier lay within the bushes. The expedition to the other side of the fences, the project's Apache territory. It was a war of exclamations in which you refused to lose, insisting that cowboys always win. Even then, we demarcated territories, outlined social philosophies, defined class stands. Today, you keep playing the cowboy at Wells Fargo. You still carry your guns. I, an Indian among pale faces, live on the Lower East Side, where today new frontiers are ravished, and the swarthy man no longer fights for land, but for a bit of roof and a street to call homeland. This is no game, brother. You walk with illusion in your holster. Your own death sleeps in the chamber of your revolver. Get away from the TV and come. Cross the Mississippi Valley, land fertilized with thousands of Indian corpses, and where blacks shed blood and sweat growing cotton so white, white, white. Come and cross the Southeast, where Jackson the hero turned Indian against Indian with false promises, where Jackson the president campaigned massacring tribes and raffling off their lands in the state lottery. Visit up north, where poor whites and freed blacks once faced each other, still face each other, while the boss dreams unscathed under the coconut groves. Go to the west, where hundreds of Irish and German immigrants died and killed to tear from Mexico its blood and lands. And all for what? All for whom? Have you, my brother, received some allotment? Your share of gold, exemptions of profits? The cowboy of these lands is not the technicolor pioneer you saw on TV. He isn't a free man looking for frontiers. Come and cross over to this side of the ocean, where you are, like I am, one more Indian destined to lose in the mortal game played in the Wild West north of the Americas.
In the presence of. In the presence of women determined by circumstances, relations in which I'm dealing. Around my mother, I am a child, a new branch of a tree, thinking of playgrounds, double dutch, jack, jumping ropes, Barbie dolls. Meow. With time, I became the woman she had in mind, still feeling like a little girl waiting to play with Ken. In the presence of women, I feel like a cat lurking around different corners trying to find what I may think is family. Meow. Meow. I exude love, confidence, compassion, but I also have a tendency to express male energy. You see, spiritually, he came with me. Yin and yang, like a woman in the presence of a man. So, in exercising, I give strength to the ladies under my wing. To them, I am a woman of power. When instructing class, I am a leader. When entertaining on stage, I am a public servant. When negotiating, I represent what I see versus what they see. I'm a witch if they're throwing daggers at me. Meow. I'm a loser to some, not having a husband or children, but I am a warrior because I fight for my right to be a woman. Meow. In the presence of men in my family, I'm this 21st century model of what not to marry. A woman who wears pants. Oh no, what happened to them all? In the presence of men in the street, I'm a hottie, and I'm so pretty. They're also educated. The only way for them to greet me is by saying, Mira, mami, coño. In the presence of men at work, todos son putos. They think rehearsals means other things. No. I'm a professional, me dicen. A professional what? Mindless piece of meat. Thinks my sole purpose as a woman is to satisfy his every need. An affair, you say? An affair of the body or an affair of the mind? You did say you were a professional. A professional what? Mama! In the presence of men I lust for, boy, oh boy, why don't you notice me? I could do not see you're the one for me, tonight at least. I want to feel your big hands ravishing my body gently. First, run your hands through my hair, caress my face, embrace my body in such a way I become immersed inside of thee. Sit me on top of your hot rock and let me stroke my genie as I make a wish for love. In the presence of men I disgust. How dare you practice superiority? Don't you know you came from me? My type, that is. If they're uneducated, that's one thing. If they are educated, they think that they can handle me in a way for me to conform to them. Oh, no. You are highly mistaken. You got the wrong lady. in the presence of myself, I am the goddess, the leading lady, la reina del barrio, Ana Gaona that tends to wander a bit. A free spirit floats on earth, influencing history. A shining star overlooking this planet, contributing energy to the universe. A river has no end, and sweet water cleanses the soul. Perfect in my imperfection, in the presence of me, I am pure poetry. Meow, meow.
Hello. I will be reading a short story called Mapping, and is a short story dedicated to my grandparents, Sofia Salamang and Ramon Figueroa. I remember what it was like the first few years. I remember our nights together in wondrously rich textures. I don't remember the words, but back then we hadn't needed words. When Toño came home after a day in the cane fields, after the animals had been fed and the shutters closed, he brought me the clean smell of the earth on his skin. And the scent of that soil made me feel that we were part of a larger design which stretched back to the beginning when there was just man and woman and nature and everything was green and fertile. Time. We seemed to have all the time in the world back then. Smooth, evenly unwinding time. I used that time to study him with my skin. My favorite was cucharitas, teaspoon, a position in which I settled my back into his chest and he folded himself over me like a giant poppy. My back knew him better than my eyes or my hands. The tops of my shoulders knew the shape of his chest, like umber hills of rolling, pulsing earth. My shoulder blades recognized the shadowy valley between and the thick eel of a scar over his left nipple. And the curve of my waist knew the muscles that smoothed over his ribs and trembled slightly if I lingered there too long. My buttocks knew the tickle and whisper of his pubic hair as I tried to imagine each individual one coiled into a tight curl, ready to spring at my very touch. I'd continue studying him with my flesh, stopping lower, there, where he fell away when he bent his knees just a little. He'd be ready to go on, but I would hold back, etching the map of his body onto my skin, memorizing its fertile valleys, its triangular pasture, and finally, its surging river. Oh yes, I stored all of it away so that when he'd be out cutting cane all day and I'd be cooking over the coal fire, I could pull up the map in my mind and on my skin and anticipate the next time. I remember those times well, before the twin hurricanes, San Felipe and San Cipriano, before the depression, before my perpetual weariness and the constant worries about the weather, the crops, and money. It was all before that damned woman and before the babies. It was the babies that did it, you see. They were the ones that broke my back, that tore my skin and froze my heart. It was my baby in the coffin and hers in the cradle. It was mine who would have been named Christian and hers who she named Cristina. It was my monumental grief, my mortally wounded core. It was the stinging betrayal. It was the deadening of all joy. It was the stabbing pain, my unspeakable anger. His explanations and promises could not touch me. A monstrous silence moved into our home. For years, I dreamt that I had lost a precious thing that I would never find again. I'd wake up wet from the sweating and the tears. I'd turned to stone right there on our bed, and the mapping died. But there was the land, the family, the bits and pieces of the life we had created. So we faced one morning after another, one year after another. Other children came, years of good harvest, times of failed crops. We found joy in our children's faces and comforted each other in times of loss. We toiled, saved, argued, built, and lived our lives together, but the mapping was long forgotten. Many years later, there was a season when, without explanation, one after another of our neighbors began falling ill to some silent and unseen enemy. And then one rainy day, it came to our house. I got a good look at the face of death peeping in the windows, all big and bold and ready to come strutting in and making himself at home. I squared my shoulders and got ready for the fight, but it hadn't come for me. And I watched helplessly as Toño slipped into a heavy slumber. The doctor's mouth said coma. His words kept coming, falling all around me. Mortality rate, brain dysfunction, prognosis, words I didn't recognize. I looked at the doctorcito with his smooth cheeks and his soft hands, and I looked down at my Toño, a mass of brown wrinkles stamped by time. The boy's words kept coming, drowning my life, and I couldn't let him do that. So I sent the words away and called up the pictures that floated up to meet me. There was Mercedita, smiling and happy on her graduation day, in her nurse's whites all bright and new. Then there was Jose, walking away from us onto that plane, grown and handsome in his military uniform. I watched the same plane bring back his coffin. They took our son, and they gave us a little triangle of a flag, not even our own. Then there were the happy faces in the church full of friends and neighbors when Pepín, our first grandchild, was christened. And yet, at the bottom of it all was the picture of that funeral so long ago. There I was, empty and aching, our baby cold in its tiny coffin, and there she was, full and fertile, holding the future in her womb. I couldn't nurse our baby, so I nursed the pain. I saw myself draped in bitterness, sheathed in righteousness. I fed on that pain for years, denied myself and Toño so much, and I made him pay tenfold for his betrayal. That was the hardest picture to face, the one I had buried so deep within myself. Sorry, little hope, the doctorcito was still talking. I looked out the window behind him. It was still drizzling, but the threatening waters in his words began to fade. Shh, doctor, you'll wake up my Toño. Pero señora, you don't understand. But it was he who did not understand. So I turned away and continued looking deep into the closet of my soul. In my mind's eye, I examined the photographs of our lives, faded colors, cracks, curling edges, and all. I visited old memories like a continuously revolving landscape. I sniffed out every dream that was and never came to be. I took out the double scales of good and bad, and I began weighing. I poked and prodded at myself, dug into every wrinkle, followed every curve, explored every shadow, and always, always, there was Toño in the background, always the quiet, contrite man standing beside me. His assurances had been true and sure. No one else, never again. And after all those years, that picture of infidelity had faded as well. When my mind came back to the hospital room, the rain had stopped and the sunlight fell on Toño's face. You come back to me, viejo. We got too much together and I got nothing alone. So, negro, I'll just sit here and wait. After many days, Toño opened his eyes and smiled as I had prayed he would. I thanked the doctorcito, who still did not understand, and held my Toño's hand as we walked out into the sunshine, leaning on each other. So it was that when the children were children no longer, all grown up and gone with children of their own, when we were silver-haired grandparents and the grand music of our lives had settled into a softly played melodia on classical guitars. Just when we were presented with the matching pair of rocking chairs for the elderly, it came back, the mapping. My flesh had stored everything. The terrain was flatter, the skin looser. The movements less strenuous, but it was there nonetheless. We began to study each other like new lovers. No, like old lovers rediscovered. We found the deeper understanding brought by experience of a lifetime together, a quiet love for the years, and an appreciation for the mellowness of time. The rockers sat idle many an evening when Toño and I blew out the lanterns early and locked the front doors. Thinking us tired and in need of rest, or perhaps secretly ill, our children worried about their aging parents. They voiced their concerns about our lack of energy, insisted on doctors and visiting nurses, and even consulted the priest. Toño and I smiled, thanked them for their rockers and their concern. We reassured our children of our excellent health, then continued going to bed earlier and earlier every night and staying there later and later every morning. Thank you.
The Boricua who sang Broken Boleros. The name has been changed to protect the poet. Don Sinforoso claimed the Valencia oranges crate outside of Doña Hilda's Botanica, where for $5 you could receive advice on any subject, and a holy card of San Martín de Porres, the only black saint we knew about in the South Bronx. Well, maybe there were others, but nobody told us. Don Sinforoso started every day con 4 palitos of whatever he could get at the crosstown bar. From the change he collected the day before, from the women who couldn't resist his tears when he sang boleros in a voice that could grate yuca. Don Sinforoso, who secretly hated his own name, called the black saint Martín de la Poja, and immediately begged La Virgen Maria to forgive his blasphemia, crossing himself, kissing his thumb, presumably the body of Christ. Don Sinforoso, always the gentleman, in the presence of women and girls, tipped his invisible hat, extended an invisible rose, bowed until the corner of Fox and Tiffany gulfed the last bite of feminine shadow. He swore in a loud voice that he had learned his good manners in Korea, where he had to kill people who were better than he was, including women and children. He swore on the eyes of his mother and the virgin vagina of his sister that it was the Chinos who taught Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Cubans how to eat rice. He swore on the kidneys of his dead father that we were all mental defectives, which was why we ate with forks instead of chopsticks. Don Sinforoso assured us the world would be a better place if everyone would confess their sins and have the cojones to admit that somewhere deep in their livers they hate negros y chinos. And then repent. Repenting, he assured us, would be the hard part.
Pigeon, I already know that you like campuses and cafes, and I remember you like that. I remember you speaking of those days of glory and silhouettes, with eyes that know of colors and distances, marginal in your dreams of an adult child, as you walk through rooftops, strong wind blowing. But as for me, I like the plazas of small towns, or the silent parks filled with rain. I like to stand facing the river as a rusty ship forming in the fog flares out the lives of people I don't know. And then, imagining myself, I would like to be another person in a strange land. I would like to speak many languages, be unique. I would like to be nameless. I would like to be a dove. Nonconformist. You say you don't understand my discontent with reality, that I dream too much, and in the mornings I am tired. You say I don't accept life as it is, that I camouflage it, disguise it, prettify it, deform it, homesick for the future. Like a poor girl from a lost village, making up games for lack of toys, among dusty screens and spider webs in my dead uncle's deserted houses, reading love letters written during the war, inventing intrigues and lovers in alleyways that smell of urine and salt pepper. When I realize that's what I do, I wash, iron, cook, mop, but then washing the window panes, to be precise, the one by the bath. I recall my grandparents' mirrors with the flamingos. I dream of Chinese sunshades, ancient novels, infamous nightclubs, and break free of my mind this star-filled womb I inherited from my mother.
The Invisible Girl. This is a poem that Ben Soto helped me translate, and we try to capture a children's song in English, try to capture the spirit of the song. I have a little doll all dressed in blue. She has dark brown eyes and cries boo-hoo. She has reading problems. She writes disconnected verses in which rainbows are smashed like the sky's mouth, she says. Terror gave her wings, and though she's everyone's target, I've seen her melt into the blackboard, becoming invisible. I have a little doll all clean and cute. She winks her eyes and says, so I love you. She's always clean, like a cracked teacup whose scars do not wash off with water. She's 8 years and 3 suicide attempts old. They call me through the windows, she explains. I have a little doll all dressed in blue. She wears pink satin bows and shiny shoes. Sometimes her eye is black, almost purple and inflamed. Sometimes a strange rash of dark red blotches peeks from beneath the flounces of her skirt. Sometimes she scratches people off with her tongue, flinging words that are too large for her body. Sometimes she grinds scissors in her eyes or closes her fist like a hand of stone over the small world of her paper and flees through the cracks with the cockroaches. I have a little doll that belongs to us. Her wounds are black and blue and drip with pus. And these poems were from the 80s and 90s, from Be Woman in Verses, and now this poem is from Poems to Heal By, The Messenger of Hope. There is a goddess living in that crack. That wound you carry is sacred. That scratch, that lump, that burning pain, that toxic, damaging rubbish inside you, the illness you resent and see as your enemy and destruction is a threshold into your unique essence, a key into your life purpose, a guide into your deepest truth. You see it all the time. The field is plastered in cement. The yard is covered in debris. All life seems to be dead and buried. Then, out of the smallest crack, the fresh green shoot emerges. It is a messenger of hope, your hope. Its message blossoms in its leaves. You have the power to heal everything.
Namyo Harenge Kyo. Epistle to Charm Vida. Namyo Harenge Kyo. Namyo Harenge Kyo. Charm Vida. Named before conceived. The feeling of weight in me, on me, around me. I live to say your name. As I rushed to the place of healing, you took over my life. As I watch you floating, flipping, dancing in nothing, I want to protect you. Through the monitor, a scene of happiness in your universe of creation. I want to teach you. Without a care to decipher, only the possibility of being born into this cipher, I want to watch you grow. Elements of emotions. Fear versus excitement. Scared of the unknown. Excited in who I've become. Extraordinary transformation and love in being. I want to be your mommy. Fortune child. A seed moving when the moon dances with the sun and stars are born. I love you, my universe. It is a charmed life. Namyo Harenge Kyo. Namyo Harenge Kyo. Namyo Harenge Kyo.
This has been a wonderful event. I am so proud of the writers, and I'm so proud of the accomplishment that we have done with this. And I would urge you to please look for this book. You can obtain it through Amazon.com, and it's a great gift for anybody, and also it will delight you. I would like to invite the writers to come forth and have a brief dialogue with all of them.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rena Valentine, and the relevance to literature is history, and of course, to basically have access to information. And if we don't take the time to provide it and or read about it, then we kind of don't have a stand in our community, or in our culture, in our world. And I'm so proud and I'm so grateful to you for including me in this. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. I personally feel that Breaking Grounds is a historical book, and that I think universities should actually teach a course around it because of the variations of women in this book, the age ranges, the New Rican versus the Puerto Rican, the English, the Spanish, the different language. It's a phenomenal book, and I hope each and every one of you leave with one today.
I would also like to talk about the relevance of literature today at a time where we have all this technology telling us stories. I write about the stories that our grandparents and great-grandparents told us, which are not found on the internet, which are not found in television. I am particularly interested in writing about Afrodescendientes because we are invisible in our national dialogue, although we certainly are visible physically. And so especially as I get older, I feel a certain responsibility to bridge what was with what will be, whatever that is that our children choose to make. But I think literature is one way to do it, and it is a much more intimate way of doing it than going to the movies or going to the internet. So for me, storytelling through literature is a way of an intimate dialogue with our ancestors, and that's why I think it's important.
First of all, I want to thank Mirna Nieves for her cultural leadership and her courage and 10 years of dedication to do this book. This is an anthology that I'm proud to be part of because it's an anthology that bridges the Las Dos Orillas. It's an anthology that didn't ask me if I write in Spanish or English or Spanglish, that it just said, you're Puerto Rican, you've been here so long, you're welcome. And I think that's very important for us to be united, to know that we're all Puerto Rican. And what I'd like to talk a little bit about the importance of poetry and storytelling, because I am a poet and a storyteller, in today's modern world. Today, there's 3 reasons why this is very important. One is personal, one is social, and the other one is professional. The number one, the personal is because soul speaks in poetry. And we're so stressed out. We're so busy that we need to bring ourselves to soul in order to relax, slow down, and to also find our self-direction. Socially, this is an age of transformation, but we don't have time to transform because we're always hurrying up. So the easiest and quickest way to do a transformation is through storytelling, through the stories and the poetry that you read and write. And professionally, scholars and both entrepreneurs and scholars agree that right now the key to success professionally is creativity.
What I want to say is that this book is a stand against erasure, because so many have tried to erase mujeres puertorriqueñas. They've tried to erase our voices. They've tried to erase our history. And those of us who are cojonúa, like all the women up here now. They have really tried to erase us. And Dr. Nieves, she, as was said beautifully, you know, she didn't ask, do you write in Spanish? Do you write in English? Do you write in Spanglish? Just do you write? And are you Puerto Rican? And I was able to write about a taboo subject, not making my mother a saint. And I welcome that I had the opportunity to do that. Thank you. And I want to thank Iris Morales for making this happen.
This has been a really wonderful event. I have enjoyed again the writing of these women, and I want to thank you all for attending and hope that you will enjoy the book as much as I enjoyed writing it. Thank you.